on this folder. So inside the folder, I have this project 4 dealing with the categorical feature. Click on this folder so that we can open it in our Google Colab environment. So my project 4, I need a few libraries to import. That is, I need NumPy, Pandas, and I need train test split, which I will import from sklearn.model_selection. So let's run this cell to import these libraries. Now it's time to get the data. Here I am getting a data from this address http.vincent, and we can see that this is a data set about the salaries. So this is the data set about the salaries, and I am going to import this data set from this URL. Okay, then I will pass this data URL in pd.read.csv. So basically this is a CSV file. So in order to import it completely, I have to read it with the help of pandas. Let's run this cell to import the data. Now, if we see at the first column of the data, we have the index due to pandas, and there is the index which is present already in the data set. Now we have to remove this index so that we will have only one index in the data, so that in order to avoid the confusion of the two indices in the data, we have to remove this index. So in order to remove this index, I have to write it as index underscore column equals to 0. So now if I import it again, so I can see that I have removed the index of the dataset, and this is the index of the pandas. Okay, now I have quite a few number of features here. I have a rank, I have a discipline, I have year since PhD, I have years of services, I have sex, and I have salary. So the salary in this data set is the value of label. Rest of these values are the features. So if I see that instead of year since PhD and services, I have the categorical value. So the rank is professor, assistant professor, and similarly the discipline is B and A, and sex is male and female. So we can see that we have 3 columns where we have seen the categorical features, and we have to learn how to deal with these categorical features. The reason is that computer needs those values in the form of numbers, either 0, 1, or some other numbers. We cannot pass this column in terms of professor and assistant professor, similarly discipline in terms of B and A, and sex in terms of male and female. So in terms of male and female, we cannot pass these values directly to our machine. We have to replace them with some other features. So how to deal with? So these are the categorical features. So how to deal with the categorical features like rank, the discipline, and the sex? So the concept is that we have to create the dummy variables for them. So these dummy variables we will create with the help of the pandas libraries. So let's see what are the dummy variables and what is meant by the dummy variables and how they help us to deal with the categorical features. So in the first step, I am going to create the dummy variables for the column known as rank. Okay, so I am using a function pd.get_dummies, and this is my column df rank. So if I run this cell, I will get the dummies of this rank. Let's run this cell. So we can see that basically there are 3 categorical features in that column of a rank: professor, the associate professor, assistant professor, and the professor. So we have 3 categorical values in that rank column. Now we can see that the dummy variable has assigned the value 0, 0, 1 to the first sample of the data, then 0, 0, 1 to the second. It means now these categorical features have been replaced by those dummy variables. Now how this dummy variable concept is working here? If we see for the first sample, we have the value 1 assigned to the professor and 0, 0 assigned to the assistant professor and associate professor. So what is the reason behind? If we go back, in our first sample, the professor is present. In the second sample, also the professor is present. So we can see that in the first 2 columns, the professor has been assigned 1. Because only professor is present, the assistant and associate professors are absent, or their information is not present in the first 2 data samples. So the value 0 is assigned to them. So we can see that in every sample of this data, only one of the value of the categorical feature is present, whether it is professor, assistant professor. So we assign the one to that value which is present in that particular sample, and we assign 0 to those values which are absent. So we have 3 in the associate professor, assistant professor, and professor. We have 3 dummy variables created for the column rank. Okay, now we can also create the dummy variables of 2 columns simultaneously. That is, we can create rank and sex. Okay, let's run this cell. So we can see that we have the rank associate professor, rank assistant professor, rank professor, and about the sex column, it has male and female, female and male. So if we see, we have already seen this. If we see female and male, so we can see that a 1 is assigned to the first column and in the male section, and 0 is assigned to the female. The reason is, for the first data sample, the male is present. The first data sample is about the sex male. That's why the 1 number is assigned to the male for the first and 0 is assigned for the female. Okay. Now we can also see, or we can also create the dummy variables of all the columns in a single line of code, that is rank, sex, and discipline. So let's run this cell. So we can see that now we have the dummy variable for every categorical feature. We have the dummy variable for rank. We have basically 3 dummy variables for a rank. We have 2 dummy variables for the sex, and we have 2 dummy variables A and B for the discipline. Now we can see that there are a lot of dummy variables, and now we have to append those dummy variables back to our original data set. Now the thing is, if I attach or if I append those dummy variables, there are a lot of repetition in the feature. That is, all the dummy variables have value either 0 and 1. So there is a lot of repetition or redundancy in the feature. So what I can do in order to reduce the redundancy? So I can drop the first column or the first dummy variable for each of the column. That is, for rank, I can drop the associate professor. For sex, I can drop the female column. And for discipline, I can drop the A. The reason is, if you see male and female here, the reason is, if I drop female and I get a 0 in the male. So when I get a 0 in the male, look at here. Here the male is 0. It means the female is present. So I do not need a female column, because when the value assigned to the male column is 0, it means male is not present in that data sample, the female is present. And when I get a value of male is equals to 1, it means male is present and female is absent. Similarly, if I get a value of 1 for the professor, it means the professor is present and there is no information in the first data sample about the assistant professor and the associate professor. Similarly, if I remove this associate professor and I get both zeros in the assistant professor and professor, it means the assistant professor is 0, the professor is 0. It means that data sample is about the associate professor. Similarly, if I see about the discipline, when B is present, it means A is absent. Since dummy variables are only in the form of 0 and 1, therefore I do not need all the columns. If I drop one column, there will be no loss in the information. That is, if the male is present, if I remove the female column and I consider only the male column, even that the information is enough, because if male is present, the dummy variable will assign 1, and if the male is absent, it will assign 0. It means that that column is particular about the female. So what we are going to do now, that we are creating the dummy variables again, and we are dropping the first column. So this is a very important step. Drop underscore first is equals to true. So let's run this cell and see now. Now these are our dummy variables. If you compare them, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, and now we have only 4 columns. So we have dropped associate professor column, the female column, and the A column from the discipline. So we are left with those dummy variables. So these are the dummy variables which are finalized. Now it's time to append those dummy variable to our original data. So I am using pd.concat. Concat means I am going to concatenate these df.dummies, that is these dummy variables. with my data. So pd.concat has two input, that is df.dummies. I am going to append them along the column. Therefore, axis is equals to 1. So let's run this cell and call it df2. Now we have created the dummy variables for the categorical variables, that is for rank, for sex, and for discipline. Now we have to drop rank, sex, and discipline column because their dummy variables have been created now. Since these are the representative of these columns, rank, discipline, and sex, now we need to remove them so that we have their dummy variables only. So I am going to drop. So the function is df.drop rank, sex, discipline. I am going to drop these columns. Axis is equals to 1. So these are column, and in place is equals to 2. I want to drop them permanently. Let's run this cell and now see your df. So there is your df. So this is the final form of our data set where we have dealt with the categoricals data. So we have learned this, how to deal with the categorical features. That is, we have to create the dummy features or the dummy variables for the categorical features, which are in the form of 0 and 1. And then we have to drop the first column of the dummy variables so that we can avoid multicollinearity or the repetition of the features in our data set. Now this salary here, this salary is our y. So we are getting the value of y from the salary, and rest of the columns are our feature. So I am drop salary in order to get x, and I am only consider salary in order to get the value of y. So let's run this cell. And here we have the value of x in the form of numpy array. So basically, if you see, I have written dot values. So dot values at the end will convert those data frame values into the numpy arrays form. So these are the values. If you see, we have 19, 24, 18, 6, 3, and those values. Okay, if I do not write values here, so what will happen then? In that case, I will have the x in the form of data frames. That is year since PhD, year of services, assistant professor, professor, male, and this is B, that is discipline. So if I want to read them and I want to convert them into the numpy arrays so that I can do some further pre-processing, so I have to write dot values here. So dot values will get these values in the form of numpy arrays, and we can see that these are the values in the form of numpy array. Similarly, I am getting the value of y. Here I am not getting the value. You can see that it is still in the form of data frame. The reason is, if you have seen in all these projects which we have learned and which we are learning right now, that the data pre-processing step is only for the x. We are not right now doing any data pre-processing on our labels. So we are doing the data pre-processing step in the features only. So this is our y. Now it's time to split the data. So you can split the data here into train and testing, and here you can apply standardization. So for standardization, I have imported standard scalar. Then here I am using the standardization. I am going to do the standardization of the training component, and here I am going to do the standardization of the testing component. So the standardization we have already learned in our project 2. So the actual objective of this project was how to deal with the categorical data. We see that if we have categorical data in our data set, we have to create the dummy variables. And after creating the dummy variables, we have to drop the first column in order to avoid the repetition of the features in our data set. Then we have to append those dummy variable into our original data set. And finally, we remove those columns for which we have already created the dummy variables. Then we get our data set. So in this particular project, we learn how to deal with the categorical data by creating the dummy variables. So I hope you understood this project. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next lecture.